The world outside the windshield wasn't a road anymore. It was just a wall of white. Isabella gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles turned the color of bone, but the luxury SUV had stopped listening to her. The tires lost their grip on the ice. The car spun once, twice, and then the sickening crunch of metal against rock echoed through the canyon as she slid into the darkness. Silence followed. A cold, heavy silence. She couldn't feel her legs. The heater died. Just as she closed her eyes, accepting that she would freeze alone in the dark, a shadow blocked the wind. A massive black horse, and a man wrapped in wool and leather, looking like he had been carved from the mountain itself. Isabella Vance checked her watch for the third time in 5 minutes. The glowing digital numbers on the dashboard of her rented Audi seemed to mock her. It was for 15 p.m., but the sky over Wyoming looked like midnight. She was supposed to be in Jackson Hole by 6 for the final dinner regarding the merger of her tech firm. This deal was the culmination of 10 years of missed birthdays, skipped holidays, and sleeping 4 hours a night. It was everything she had worked for. But the main highway was closed due to a jackknifed tractor, and her GPS had rerouted her onto something called Old Pass Road. At first, it had seemed Seneca, a winding ribbon of asphalt surrounded by towering pines. But as the elevation climbed, the scenery disappeared. The gentle snow flurry that had started back in the valley had transformed into a violent, swirling beast. The wind howled, shaking the heavy frame of the car. Isabella tapped the brakes, but the pedal felt mushy. Fear, cold and sharp, pricked at the back of her neck. She was a city girl. She knew how to navigate a boardroom full of hostile investors. She knew how to hail a taxi in rush-hour Manhattan, and she knew the best espresso spots in London. She did not know how to handle a Wyoming whiteout. "Just keep moving," she whispered to herself, her voice trembling slightly. "Don't stop. Just keep moving." The GPS signal flickered and died. The comforting blue line on the screen vanished, leaving her alone in the gray void. A sudden gust of wind, stronger than the rest, slammed into the side of the car. The rear tires hit a patch of black ice. It happened in slow motion. The back of the car swung out. Isabella, over. The Audi pirouetted gracefully across the center line, sliding sideways toward the edge of the ravine. She slammed on the brakes, screaming, but physics didn't care about her fear. The front bumper clipped a snowbank, flipping the car onto its side before it slid down the embankment, coming to a violent halt against a cluster of ancient pine trees. The airbag deployed with a punch that knocked the wind out of her. Then everything went quiet. Isabella blinked, coughing in the dust from the airbag. The car was tilted at a 45-degree angle. The engine had stalled. She reached for her phone. No service. She tried to open the door, but it was jammed against the snow and rock. The cold arrived instantly. With the engine dead, the Wyoming winter began to seep through the metal and glass, hunting for her warmth. She was wearing a cashmere coat, stylish for a dinner party, but useless against sub-zero temperatures. She curled into a ball, watching her breath form clouds in the dim light of the dashboard. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. The numbness started in her toes and worked its way up. She realized, with a terrifying clarity, that nobody knew she was on this road. She was going to die here. She was going to freeze to death in a rental car, clutching a contract for a company she didn't even like anymore. She closed her eyes, tears freezing on her lashes. Caleb Thorne adjusted his hat low over his eyes to block the biting wind. His horse, a massive black quarter horse named Midnight, snorted and pawed at the snow. They had been out checking the north fence line since noon, making sure the herd hadn't drifted into the canyon before the storm hit its peak. Caleb was a man of few words, even to himself. He preferred the company of the mountains. People were complicated. They lied, they left, and they wanted things. The mountains just were. They demanded respect, and if you gave it to them, they let you survive. He was about to turn Midnight back toward the ranch house when he saw it, a glint of metal down in the ravine. totally out of place among the timber and rock. "Easier, boy," Caleb murmured, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to vibrate in his chest. He squinted. Tracks, skid marks, leading off the edge of Old Pass Road. He didn't hesitate. He guided the horse down the treacherous slope, the animal moving with practiced sure-footedness. As he got closer, he saw the luxury car, crumpled like a tin can against the trees. Caleb dismounted, his boots crunching heavily in the deep snow. He didn't expect to find anyone alive. A crash like that, in temperatures like this, usually meant a recovery mission, not a rescue. He pulled a heavy flashlight from his saddlebag and shined it through the shattered driver's side window. Inside, a woman was curled against the steering wheel. Her skin was pale, almost translucent. Her lips were blue. "Hey!" Caleb shouted, banging his gloved fist on the glass. "Can you hear me?" Isabella heard the sound, but it felt like it was coming from underwater. She lifted her head weakly. A beam of light blinded her. Then a face appeared. Rugged, a heavy beard, eyes the color of slate. Caleb saw her move. She was alive. He worked quickly. The door was jammed, so he braced his boot against the frame and pulled with everything he had. The metal groaned and shrieked, finally popping open. The wind rushed into the cabin, stealing the last of the heat. "We have to move," Caleb said, his voice leaving no room for argument. He reached in unbuckling her seatbelt. My laptop," Isabella whispered, her teeth chattering so hard the words were barely intelligible. "The contract." Caleb looked at her like she was insane. "Ma'am, you're freezing to death." "The contract doesn't matter." He didn't wait for permission. He scooped her up into his arms. She felt impossibly light, like a bird with hollow bones. He pulled a heavy wool blanket from his saddle roll and wrapped it around her, completely engulfing her expensive coat. "Can you ride?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. She was shaking too hard to stand, let alone ride. He lifted her onto Midnight, then swung up behind her. He pulled her back against his chest, wrapping his heavy canvas duster around both of them. "Hold on to the saddle horn," he commanded. "And don't fall asleep. You hear me? Stay awake." The ride back was a blur for Isabella. The only reality was the rhythmic thud of the horse's hooves, the howling wind, and the solid, radiating heat of the man behind her. He smelled like wood smoke, pine resin, and horse. It was the most grounding scent she had ever known. Isabella woke up to the sound of crackling fire. She blinked, confused. She wasn't in the car. She wasn't in a hospital. She was lying on a soft leather sofa, covered in a thick quilt that looked handmade. The room was dimly lit by the orange glow of a cast-iron wood stove in the corner. The walls were made of rough-hewn logs. Trophies of elk antlers hung above the mantel. It was rustic, but clean. She tried to sit up, but her head spun. "Easy," a voice said from the shadows. Caleb stepped into the light. He had taken off his heavy coat and hat. His dark hair was messy, and he wore a simple flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle from years of hard labor. He held a mug in his hand. "Drink this," he said, handing her the mug. "Broth. You need the salt." Isabella took the mug with trembling hands. "Where am I?" "Thorne Ranch," Caleb said, sitting in a rocking chair opposite her. "About 10 miles from where you crashed. I'm Caleb." "Isabella," she managed to say. She took a sip. It was hot, savory, and perfect. "My phone. I need to call. ... Lines are down," Caleb said, cutting her off gently. "Power is out, too. We're running on the generator, but I'm saving the fuel for the water pump. The storm knocked out the cell tower on the ridge. Nobody is calling anybody for at least 2 days." 2 days. Isabella's eyes widened. "You don't understand. I have a merger. Billions of dollars are on the line. If I'm not in Jackson, ... Caleb leaned back, the wood of the chair creaking. He looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite place: pity, maybe, or perhaps amusement. Look outside, Isabella. She looked toward the window. It was completely blocked by snow. The drifts were halfway up the glass. Nature doesn't care about your merger, Caleb said quietly. You're alive. That's the only deal you closed today. For the next 3 days, time stopped. Isabella, stripped of her technology and her schedule, felt like she was going through withdrawal. She paced the small cabin. She checked her phone every 10 minutes, even though it was a dead brick. But slowly, the rhythm of the ranch began to seep into her. She watched Caleb. He was in constant motion, yet he never seemed rushed. He went out into the storm to break ice on the water troughs for the horses. He brought in armfuls of firewood, shaking the snow off his shoulders like a grizzly bear. He cooked simple meal stew, biscuits, eggs on the wood stove. By the 3rd day, Isabella felt useless sitting on the couch. "Can I help?" she asked, standing in the kitchen doorway. Caleb looked up from chopping onions. "You ever cook on a cast-iron stove?" I make reservations," she admitted, smiling weakly. Caleb chuckled. It was a low, rusty sound, like a gate that hadn't been opened in years. "Come here. I'll teach you." Standing next to him, the heat radiating from the stove, Isabella felt a strange tension. He was so large, so capable. His hands, rough and scarred, moved with surprising gentleness as he showed her how to feed the firebox to control the temperature. "You live here all alone?" she asked softly. "I like the quiet," Caleb said, not looking at her. "The world out there, it's too much noise. People talk just to hear themselves. Here, you only speak when it matters. Doesn't it get lonely?" Caleb stopped slicing. He looked at her, his gray eyes intense. "Sometimes, but loneliness is better than heartbreak." He didn't elaborate, and she didn't push. But that night, as the wind howled outside, they sat by the fire and talked. Isabella told him about the pressure of her father's legacy, how she felt like a hamster on a wheel, running faster and faster, but going nowhere. Caleb told her about the ranch, how his grandfather built this cabin, and how he fought every year to keep the land from developers. There was a moment, just as the fire was dying down, where the silence between them changed. It wasn't empty anymore. It was charged. Isabella looked at Caleb, the firelight dancing on his face. He was looking at her lips. The air in the room felt suddenly thin. She leaned in, just an inch. Caleb mirrored the movement. Then the lights flickered and surged on. The hum of the refrigerator kicked in. The spell broke. "Power's back," Caleb said, his voice rough. He stood up abruptly. "I should check the breaker box." He walked out into the cold, leaving Isabella sitting alone with a heart that was beating faster than it ever had in a boardroom. The next morning, the sun was blinding. The storm had broken, leaving the world covered in a pristine, glittering blanket of white. And with the sun came the sound of an engine. Isabella looked out the window to see a massive orange snowplow clearing the long driveway, followed by a black sheriff's SUV. "Road crews," Caleb said. He was standing on the porch, holding a cup of coffee. He didn't look happy. He looked resigned. The sheriff knocked on the door. "Caleb, you okay in there? We saw a car in the ravine. Ran the plates." "The rental company said a Miss Vance was driving." "She's here," Caleb said. "She's safe." Isabella packed her things. Her coat was dry now. Her phone chimed with 300 notifications, voicemails from her assistant, her lawyer, the board. The reality of her life came rushing back like a flood, drowning the peace she had found in the cabin. She walked out onto the porch. Caleb was waiting by the sheriff's truck. "I guess this is it," Isabella said. She felt a lump in her throat the size of a stone. "I guess so," Caleb said. He held his hat in his hands. "The sheriff will take you into town. You can get a flight out of Jackson tonight." Caleb, she wanted to say, "so much." She wanted to say, "thank you." She wanted to say, "come with me." She wanted to say, "ask me to stay." But the phone in her pocket buzzed again. Her life was waiting. "Thank you for saving my life," she said instead. "Take care of yourself, Isabella," Caleb said softly. He didn't touch her. He didn't hug her. He just put his hat back on, shading his eyes. She got into the sheriff's truck. As they drove away, she looked back. Caleb was standing on the porch, watching her go. He looked small against the backdrop of the massive, snow-covered mountains, a solitary figure in a vast, empty world. New York City was gray, not the clean, bright white of Wyoming, but a dirty, slushy gray. Isabella sat in her corner office on the 45th floor. The merger had gone through. She was richer than she had ever been. She was the cover story of 3 business magazines this month. Everyone told her she looked great, but she felt like a ghost. The noise of the city was constant. Sirens, honking, the hum of the HVAC system. She couldn't sleep. She had bought a white noise machine that played rain and thunder, but it just sounded like static. It didn't sound like the wind howling through the pines at Thorne Ranch. She went on a date with a handsome investment banker named Julian. He took her to a Michelin-star restaurant. He talked for 2 hours about his CrossFit routine and his portfolio. "Are you listening, Bella?" Julian asked, swirling his wine. "I'm sorry," Isabella said. She looked at the tiny, artistic portion of food on her plate. "I just thought, I'm not hungry." She went home to her penthouse. It was sleek, modern, and cold. She walked to the window and looked out at the skyline. Millions of lights, millions of people, and she had never felt more alone. She opened her laptop. She wasn't looking at stocks. She was looking at real estate listings in Wyoming. Not to buy, just to look. She zoomed in on the map. There it was. Thorne Ranch. She closed her eyes, and she could smell the wood smoke. She could feel the roughness of the wool blanket. She could hear Caleb's voice saying, "Loneliness is better than heartbreak." "No," she whispered to the empty room. "It isn't." She realized then that she hadn't just left her rescuer in Wyoming. She had left herself. The woman who chopped vegetables and laughed by the fire, that was the real Isabella. This woman in the suit was just a shell. She picked up her phone. She dialed her assistant. "Cancel my meetings for tomorrow," Isabella said. "Which ones?" the assistant asked. "All of them," Isabella said. "Forever. I'm resigning." Spring had come to Wyoming. The snow had melted, revealing vast meadows of green grass and wildflowers. The air smelled of wet earth and sagebrush. Caleb was fixing the fence near the main road. He was tired. It had been a long winter and a longer spring. He worked harder now, trying to tire himself out so he wouldn't think about her. But it didn't work. Every time he walked into the cabin, he saw her sitting on his sofa. Every time he made coffee, he remembered how she held the mug with both hands. He hammered a staple into the post with unnecessary force. He heard a car approaching. He didn't look up. Probably just a tourist lost on the way to the park. The car slowed down and stopped. The engine cut. Caleb wiped the sweat from his forehead with his sleeve and turned around. It wasn't a rental car this time. It was a sturdy 4x4 truck, loaded with boxers. The driver's door opened. A woman stepped out. She wasn't wearing a cashmere coat. She was wearing jeans and boots. Her hair was loose, blowing in the wind. "Isabella." Caleb felt his heart slam against his ribs. He dropped his hammer. He walked toward the fence, not trusting his eyes. "You're lost again." It caved out his voice, rough with emotion. Isabella walked up to the fence line. She smiled, and it was the brightest thing he had ever seen. "No," she said. I'm not lost. I know exactly where I am. What about the merger? Caleb asked, gripping the fence post. The city. The life you built. I sold my shares. Isabella sighed. She took a deep breath. I realized I was building a life I didn't want to live. I was rich, Caleb, but I was starving. She reached through the fence and placed her hand over his. His hand was warm, calloused, and real. I missed the quiet, she whispered, and I missed the man who taught me how to listen to it. Caleb didn't say a word. He vaulted over the fence, ignoring the barbed wire that snagged his jeans. He landed in front of her and pulled her into his arms. This time, there was no hesitation. He said air, and it felt like coming up for air after drowning. It was a kiss full of pent-up longing, relief, and a promise. When they finally pulled apart, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. "It's a lot of work running this place," he muttered. "Fences don't fix themselves." Isabella laughed, a free, happy sound that echoed across the valley. "Good thing I'm a fast learner, and I make a pretty good stew." Caleb smiled, the first genuine smile he had worn in years. He looked at the mountains, then back at her. "Welcome home, Isabella." She looked past him, at the cabin nestled in the pines, and then up into his gray eyes. "I am home," she said. Hand in hand, they walked toward the house, the sun setting behind the Grand Tetons, painting the sky in shades of gold and violet, promising a tomorrow that they would face together.